collecting gems and minerals in the field for about 12 years now, and I've learned a thing or two about what you absolutely have to have with you. Here I've laid out what I think is absolutely indispensable. This is stuff that you want to invest in, so I recommend getting fairly high quality products because you're going to need to rely on them for safety, navigation, convenience, or just durability. One thing that is of extremely great importance is a good pair of hiking boots. Now, depending on where you're working, if you're in a quarry or in an area with a lot of loose rock or big boulders, then I would recommend getting steel-toed boots. However, when you're doing a lot of hiking, it's not always realistic to hike long distances with really heavy steel-toed boots. So these are not steel toes, and I don't wear them in active quarries or mines, but I do wear them when I'm doing longer distance hiking or localities where there's little danger of having toe injuries. And so what you're looking for in a good boot is to have a good fit. You don't want them to be too hot. I recommend getting waterproof boots because you're going to be going through some pretty difficult terrain. And good grip is very important so you don't slip. These are quite used up, so I'm going to have to get some new ones soon. And lastly, you want good ankle support because you can injure your ankle pretty easily. And if you're out a few kilometers, then getting back with an injured ankle is really not as easy as you would think. Now, speaking of safety, I think everyone should carry a first aid kit. If you're backpacking a long distance, then you should carry a larger first aid kit. If you're just hiking around a couple kilometers, you can always have a smaller first aid kit and a larger one in your vehicle. And now I'll move on to tools you use when you're digging for minerals and gems. So I recommend having a pair of gloves. It's really easy to get cut. Cuts can get infected, especially if you're camping for weeks on end. I like to use these gloves. They don't last very long, but you can feel very well with your fingers. So if you're looking for small things, small crystals, these give you a lot of dexterity, and so I find them better than big construction leather gloves. Now, another absolute must is safety goggles. Now, some people recommend safety glasses, but I have used both in the last number of years, and I can say that I would not use safety glasses, period. You should always have safety goggles, and sometimes they're annoying and they fog up, but you can just wipe the inside with a cloth. The reason I use safety goggles is the added protection from having plastic covering every entrance point is really helpful when you're hammering rocks because it's very easy to get a rock to go under safety glasses and into your eye, and I've had it almost happen to me. And the biggest danger is when you're using a big sledgehammer. This happens a lot. So safety goggles are a must. I don't recommend safety glasses. I don't think they're safe enough for rockhounding purposes. Now, a popular hammer is the Estwing, and this is the long handle one. I've used the short handle, long handle one. I personally prefer the long handle because you just have more leverage, more power. It's pretty useful to sometimes dig in the soil, dig in rocks, and pry things open. That said, I've recently moved away from this hammer, and I now far prefer the 2.5 pound crack hammer. So this is a crack hammer here, and I've had it for a number of years. I personally like the wood handles because they're a better shock absorber than the one-piece metal handles like in the Estwings. Although Estwing makes some really good tools, I do prefer a lighter and wood-handled crack hammer. The reason I prefer this is because when you use it on an actual massive rock, compared to this hammer, you're going to do a lot more damage to that rock. You're going to break it apart with far less effort, and it's not a lot heavier to bring in your pack. And the other reason is because you can use a chisel. If you want to do some precise work, then you're going to be more precise using a chisel, and you're going to have a lot more power using the 2 pound or 2.5 pound crack hammer on this chisel to get your minerals out, get your fossils out. It's far more effective than, I think, the little pick. So I recommend going for this option. And my favorite chisels, there's different options. You can spend a little less and get something at the hardware store. I think that the Estwing chisels and the bullpoint are very well designed, and they're extremely useful, they're effective. They've got a bit of sound dampening because of this rubber stop here. And I really like this feature, but you're going to find that after a while of using it, you're going to get a hole where the chisel meets the rubber, and it's going to pass through. But, you know, I just replace them when it goes through. These are the best bullpoints and the best chisels, in my opinion, for the money. They run about $30 Canadian or so. And this is the chisel. Now, another thing that's useful, if you especially are looking for gems or small crystals, is to have a really small chisel. Now, this one I should replace because it's starting to mushroom. And just as an aside, when you start having mushrooming on a chisel, you should absolutely replace it, because if you use it too much, the mushrooming can actually flake pieces of metal off, and I know some people who've had flaked off pieces of metal go into their shin, for example, while using a sledgehammer. One thing you want to be wary of when using a chisel is to not use a hammer that's too big for the chisel. For example, Estwing recommends maximum 12-ounce hammer for this. I think that if you use the 2.5 pounder and you go fairly softly, then you're fine. And for this larger bullpoint, the maximum weight for a hammer is recommended at 3 pounds. I've used a 4-pound hammer with it, and it is not bad. I wouldn't use anything heavy. You never want to use a big sledgehammer on a chisel like this, because then you really increase the chances of flaking a piece of metal off either your hammer or your chisel, and these things are very dangerous. Another great tool, especially when you're digging in crystal pockets, is a long screwdriver. So this is really lightweight, and as soon as you find a pocket, you can stick this in and, you know, pull out crystals that are on the walls or something. You want to keep in mind that this is made of metal, so if you're working crystals that are relatively soft, like a pocket of calcite, then you might want to look into getting some kind of plastic tool. Lastly, for the small tools, here's a little garden rake, and I bring one of these with me most of the time. They're really useful if you're doing small-scale work, looking for pockets in soil, working abandoned mine dumps, things like that. If you're working something like a calcite pocket, or you're looking for softer things that are more fragile, then you can get some of these in resistant plastics at a hardware store, and they actually work very well too. So the last tool that I always bring with me, even if I'm hiking, because I find it just so useful, for the weight you can move so much rock and material with it that it is indispensable. I'm really impressed by Estwing because this is a really well-designed and durable tool. This is my second one. It's called the Paleo pick, but it's useful in lots of different applications. You can pry stuff with it with the pick end. You can dig lots of soil with this end, and it's smaller than most hoe picks available in your typical hardware store. So it's far more portable, it's more lightweight, it's really durable, it's well constructed. This is one of my go-tos. I've found so many great minerals because I have this with me. I really recommend it. I think it's a must-buy, and I think it's about $70 Canadian retail right now. Now, when you're going out in the field, you always want to know where you're going and remember where you left your car. So for that, you always want to look at maps in advance. You want to tell people where you're going, but you should bring a small map and a compass. So a compass is always reliable because there's no batteries, and so there's nothing to malfunction unless you basically drop it and break it. So I keep one of these in my pack just in case, but I usually navigate with my GPS. I'm always paying attention on the directions that I'm going, the distances that I'm going, so that if I need to navigate back using my compass, then I can do so. But a GPS really facilitates your life, and I really like that, you know, good GPSs have track features, so that you can save your tracks and basically look at the trail you followed later, or see if you can find an easier path to a locality. So I use the Garmin GPS. I think they're well designed. I've never really had a problem with one of these. They're really reliable, and they take AA batteries. So if they die, I have a store of batteries on hand in my pack. Now another really good tool is a good camera. And I really regret not bringing a high quality digital camera when I was doing field work in my early years, because I found some really amazing stuff and I don't have any photos of it. Any decent digital camera can work, and you can even get one that's not waterproof and get a waterproof casing for it. Now next up, I always bring a good knife with me just in case. You know, knives have a lot of uses. You can bring a multi-tool if you prefer that. I keep mine with my first aid kit. And another thing that's great is a good flashlight. So I have this waterproof LED flashlight. The batteries last a long time in this. It's very powerful. So this is the low setting. So this is really useful when it's becoming dark. You can navigate out safely. You can see if there are any obstacles in your way, any mine shafts or something like that. And if you happen to find something underground or you want to look into a pocket, then having a light is really important. And if you find gem rough, then you want to see, you know, is your gem rough high quality? And if it's overcast, you won't be able to tell. But with a light, just shine a light through it, and you can tell if you're finding good quality material. Now, something that I absolutely have to mention is water. You should always plan accordingly when you're going in the field. Make sure you have enough water and then some. So I always carry more water than I expect to drink, especially if it's a really hot day. So I like this water bladder because when you're hiking long distances, you can drink without taking your pack off, and this is, I think, a really positive aspect of having one, because you don't want to dehydrate when you're hiking. So if you start being thirsty, then you're already starting to get dehydrated. So keep hydrated. It's a really important safety aspect in the field, because if you get dehydrated, you can start being disoriented, being weaker, and that's when really serious accidents happen. Now lastly, I think clothing is a really important part of gear for rockhounding, and I think it's a part that a lot of people don't pay enough attention to. So for sun protection, I always carry a hat. When I'm in the field, I don't like to reapply sunscreen. It sometimes gets in your eyes, it burns, it's sticky. So if you have adequate sun protection in terms of clothing, then often you don't really need to apply that much sunscreen. And then you're fine for the entire day. So a really good hat, or maybe a waterproof hat with a wide rim so that it blocks the sun, is a really good thing to have. And I like to have a hat sometimes, even when it's overcast, because the mosquitoes really have more trouble getting at you when you're wearing a wide rim hat. Another thing that I like is to have nylon clothing. Now, this gets kind of smelly really fast, but what I like about nylon is that it also dries really fast. So if you get stuck in the shower, or if you're really hot, you just take off a couple layers and you will dry very rapidly. So I have a long sleeve button-up shirt made of nylon, and it's pretty lightweight, it dries rapidly, and it prevents ticks from basically coming on me and whatever, and it prevents me from getting scratches when I'm hiking in the bush. So I really recommend that. I like having a collar because you can flip it up and prevent sunburns on your neck, and it also helps prevent mosquitoes from getting at your neck, which is kind of a nice feature. And lastly, I like nylon pants as well. If you're cold, you can always wear a layer underneath, but these are really nice. I've got the Arc'teryx ones, and they're surprisingly thin, but they're extremely durable. I've only had one pair rip on me, and it was kind of a freak accident, but I've dragged these on sharp rocks for days, and I haven't damaged most of them. So they're really good, durable, and again, the reason I like them is they dry really fast, they're super lightweight, so they're great in hot weather. I think it's worth the investment to have some good quality nylon clothing for the field. That's what I would honestly recommend. And the last thing that you should get in the back there is a good rain jacket. So, you know, a good quality rain jacket is an important thing. You can get a high visibility one if you prefer the added safety of people seeing you from a distance. but that's not necessary because you can just get a high-vis vest. However, I'd say investing in a good quality rain jacket that you're going to take care of is a really good idea, because I've had friends with cheaper rain jackets that, for example, ripped when we were hiking, and they were soaking wet, and I was really comfortable. So the quality of gear you have will control the comfort you have in the field, and sometimes even the safety.